seven deadly sins have guided Christian thought for centuries. And while there are consequences for the sins of lust, greed, envy, pride, gluttony, and sloth, perhaps the deadliest consequences come from the sin of anger.
When we're angry, we lose control. When we're angry, we border on the possibility of physical violence. When we fall into the passion of anger, we lose ourselves.
But part of the temptation of anger is that, ironically, anger is very satisfying.
It can bring people all the way to euphoria, especially men. A lot of times it's good to feel angry.
And despite centuries of religious attempts to control the sin of anger, today it is everywhere.
I'd like to think that faith would deter violence and help us manage our anger. But the fact is, the United States has the highest rate of church attendance in the affluent world, the highest rate of belief in God, and we have by far the highest murder rate.
The concept of the sin of anger has evolved over the centuries. Christian theology once said that those who commit the sin face the eternal fires of hell. But there are some sinners who are tormented by anger even in this life.
I was in a relationship, things didn't go well, to sum it up, and didn't know how to handle it. Went, bought 2 gallons of gasoline, broke out the windows in the middle of the daytime. I live in an apartment complex, filled her car up with gas, set it on fire, blew up the car in an underground parking garage. The whole place had to be evacuated. I could have killed hundreds of people.
I snapped. I beat them up. But bad enough for the courts to say, you know what, 5 years prison time.
These men aren't dealing with their sin through confession and repentance, but through anger management. The sin of anger is so widespread in society that the concept of anger management has entered the pop culture lexicon. Anutsa Bellissimo is a specialist who has treated thousands of people with anger issues.
Anger in today's society, I believe, is a very serious issue. Looking at one simple statistic of 18,000 assaults being reported per week in the U.S., I think anger is definitely an issue.
Bellissimo says that anger is not a deadly sin, but an inappropriate behavior.
I do not believe you can get rid of anger. I feel that anger is a very necessary human emotion. For me, anger is a red flag. For me, anger is a way of acknowledging that there's things that I'm not dealing with.
Experts say that the key to overcoming anger is less about controlling rage and more about creating connections.
If you tell them this anger is destroying your relationship with your wife or your children, that seems to work. Having a relationship, that's what humanity is all about. Our connection to each other.
Tradition claims that the sin of anger is punishable by eternal damnation. But Bellissimo feels this religious approach is useless in the modern world.
I've never been able to scare any angry students from being angry because they will go to hell. I've never been able to use that as a tool.
But there are some who would argue that point. One is a man named Howard Storm, who feels he has learned the demonic power of the sin of anger. In 1985, Howard Storm was a 38-year-old art professor with a serious anger problem.
I never hurt my wife or my kids, but I would yell and scream at them. I would toss the kitchen table, which was loaded for dinner. You know, toss the table and all of its contents across the room, smash things and things like that.
But while on a trip to Paris, Howard Storm found himself in a hospital emergency room, dying of a perforated intestine. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, he realized he was not alone.
What I experienced was, at first, people outside the room calling me by name to come with them. And I said, "Are you from the doctor? I'm very sick. I'm supposed to have surgery." And they said, "Hurry up. We know all about you. We don't have time for your questions. Come with us."
In a half-awake state, Storm was led down a long hallway. Suddenly, without warning, he was viciously attacked from all sides. Only at this point did he realize he was no longer in a real hospital.
I'm fighting as hard as I can fight, the best I can fight to basically just defend myself. I'm just trying to keep from being hit, scratched, bitten, pushed, kicked. And it's coming from every direction in this darkness. There aren't words to describe this. Scary, terrifying, horrible, are all completely inadequate.
At this point, Storm did something that this atheist had never considered before. He began to pray. A beam of light appeared and delivered him from the attackers. He found himself back in his hospital room, alive once again.